Hello and welcome everyone to another edition of Adobe Live. I'll be your host today, and my name is Robert or Rob, and I am super excited to have a very special guest today for another edition of Inktober. And our guest will be the one and only Kyle T. Webster. Welcome to the show, Kyle. How are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you, and thanks for having me. Hi, everybody. Robert, so great to see you. And yeah, I'm ready to draw.
It's an absolute pleasure. Last week I was asked like, hey, who can be host for today? And I was like, I would love to host Kyle, really, because I've heard so much about you. We chatted, but never, I mean, actually never met in person, but I've never been in the same stream together. So I thought it's going to be a good chance to get to know you, and also admire your work and see what you can do. And let's see who's in the chat to say hi. It's Vanessa, it is Sean, it is Sandrine, Angus, Linda, Jane, Kirsty, Steve. Holy, that's a lot of people. Wow. All right, they're all here for
Hi,
you, Kyle.
everyone.
They're all here for you.
Oh,
Doris is here, Oliver is here, Jack, and of course, Tim, who is making sure everything works fine in the background. So I can't wait to get started. So yeah, if you're watching this, by the way, on YouTube, feel free to hop on over to Behance. This is where the chat is, and this is where you can ask us questions. So if you want to ask something, directed towards Kyle or me, I'll be monitor the chat and direct the questions to him and see if he can answer them, or we can discuss things, or throw in ideas or whatever. I will also try to doodle along, because initially Kyle asked, so what are you drawing, Robert? And was like, hang on, it's the other way around. So, but then we figured out, hey, why not draw along? I have my Cintiq ready here. And I'll see what I can do on the fly. It's going to be a little bit of a freestyle, spontaneous thing, but I can't wait to get started. So Kyle, what's going on?
yeah. So, well, let's get started. I do think that one of the things that's overwhelming for people with digital art is, of course, the number of options you have. And so, one of the issues is that there are over, I believe, 60 or 70 or maybe even 80 now inking tools. And when you combine the ink box in the mega pack with some of the other sets that are available. And again, I always like to point out for people, if you don't know where to get the brushes, remember, you have to come over here to your little brush drop-down menu. And this is what we call a hamburger menu. I still don't know exactly why. I assume it's because thinking about the layers of a hamburger,
Mm-hmm.
these little four horizontal lines stacked up on top of one another. You come down to get more brushes. There it is. And
Mm-hmm.
when you tap on get more brushes, this of course will launch a sign-in page for you. You just use your Adobe ID to sign in, and you're going to have over 2,000 brushes to download them. But where do you start? So most of the brush sets that I've created that have been created since 2017 or 2018, which are these seasonal updates, will include at least a couple of inking tools. So they really add up when you add them to what's in the mega pack. That's the first brush set you'll see available for yourself to download there. And in the mega pack, there is this little ink box. And I'll
Mm-hmm.
just slowly start scrolling through the ink box, and you'll see why this is a problem for folks, because each and every one of these does something different and gives you a different kind of a mark for drawing. There are a few exceptions in there where there's something that might be good for like a little bit of a special effect kind of a thing. But generally speaking, these are all inking tools. So you have something like a wet fat pen, okay, which does something like that. If I zoom in on that, you'll
Mm-hmm.
see how an area like this, for example, right here, okay, gives you kind of like that edge of ink rather, that has been sitting on maybe like damp paper. All right, and that's sort of why that's called the wet fat pen. But then when you contrast something like that with the Sumi 2017, can just draw a line right next to it, these are not at all similar. So they all have different properties, different qualities, and you can do different things with them.
Can
Um,
I quickly interrupt you
yeah, of course.
to ask a question, because I'm very intrigued by your brushes, and of course, like, if you look at the pen, and I suppose that you were tilting the pen a little bit. Does the tilt affect, for example, if you look pretty much in the middle where you have that stroke that's going towards your right, where it's
Right here.
feathering out a little bit. Is that because of the tilt, or is that on like a random setting?
No, you're correct. It is definitely the tilt, and not all of the inking tools will respond or react to tilt like this. But because this was meant to emulate a Sumi brush or a Japanese brush pen, or even something like a Pentel pocket brush or Kuretake brush pen, they give you the ability to take your drawing tool and angle it more in a not perpendicular, but rather parallel to the drawing surface, okay? And that will affect the brush. And I'm going to demonstrate it again, but I'm not actually going to come select it here. I'm going to point out to people who may not know that the 7 most recently used brushes in your brush history are right here. A lot of people don't know this. They're kind of tucked away up here, and it sometimes goes missed. So all I have to do is come back here to that box Sumi 17. There it is. So if I'm holding it at more of a perpendicular angle, I'm going to be able to do stuff like this, okay? But if I angle it, I'm going to get more of like a dry brush kind of a thing, and I can even angle it further and do stuff like that, etc. Okay, so yeah, lots of options, lots of control, lots of different things you can do with that. Before I go on, I'm going to actually tint my paper just a little, like this. And I'm going to push that a little cooler. And the reason I do this is because it just makes a subtle difference for your eyeballs when you're not looking at something that's bright white light in your face. It's not the best thing for your eyes. It also just makes it a little gentler and easier to draw. So I find that to be nice. Not everybody has to do that, of course. It's just something I like to do. But as I go through these, you'll see, of course, yeah, like I said at the top, it's overwhelming. So one of the things you have to ask yourself on the outset of any drawing is there a particular sort of a look for the line art, the quality of the line that I want to stick with? Do I want to combine some of these brushes that might play well nicely together? What does that even mean? Sometimes you can make anything look good together. This is up to the skill of the artist or sort of the style they're going for. But other times, a nice thing to do is to simply randomly select one and then see how it makes you draw. And I think that's one of the cool things about brushes or about any tools you use when drawing, is that the tool can influence the style and the manner in which you create the image. And that can be really exciting. It can actually force you out of your comfort zone and make you try new things. And you could even develop a whole other way of working based simply on that one tool. All right, so, but I'm going to go with today, let's see if I can find that my...
And maybe it also helps to mentally, because I know exactly what you mean with being overwhelmed by the brushes, because you open up the menu and you go like, oh no, all right, that's I'm just gonna do something else today. Like you said, the best thing is to first of all try it out, and then second, get rid of the notion of having to have the right brush or the right tool, because technically there's no right or wrong. It's just you who determines if you like it or not, but it's technically there's no right or no wrong. And once you lose that attitude, like, oh, I don't want to use the wrong brush or the wrong tool, it's just playtime after you get rid of that thought. That helps me, at least personally. I don't know how it is with everyone else, but maybe that's a little tip I can share, that you just get rid of that fear of doing something wrong.
Yeah, totally. I think everyone should take the pressure off. You know, it's art. You're supposed to be having fun. If it is for a job, of course, then I think the key to that is to simply set aside some time to go through the list and see what each brush does. And then when you hit upon the one that's sort of suitable for the work you need to complete, you'll be fine. But for Inktober or for any of these other personal projects or whatever you're doing, one of the joys of doing work in a digital environment like this is that there are endless opportunities to experiment. If I were to go to the art store and buy a a bunch of different pens and a bunch of different inking tools and paints and things like that, and the price is adding up and adding up and adding up, I'm a little bit hesitant to kind of like use the materials and waste anything, or, you know what I mean? I love that here you can just start drawing and say, well, that's not really doing it, and then just Command Z your way through life. So that's the way to do it. Tim says we don't make mistakes, just happy accidents. I agree with that for it to some extent. Of course, it depends on what we're talking about. If it's art, sure enough. All right. So shall we think of a little sketch here to do and then ink it? How about that? That seems like the most appropriate thing.
Today's prompt for Inktober is flame, as far as I know.
That's right. I'll just put that up here so people know what we're doing. There we go. Okay, now for sketching, of course, I'd like to use a pencil. Not everybody has to do that. A lot of people like to sketch with a marker, you know, because it feels kind of like you're working with Copics or Copics or however you say that, or Prismacolors, whatever you want to use. And that's kind of a nice way to sketch. I know a lot of concept artists really like sketching with a gray marker, you know. But I think I'm just going to hit this with pencil. And in the drawing box, you have the same problem as the ink box. Look at all this nonsense. But not all of these are pencils. There are a lot of different tools in here. But I'm just going to stick with something that is an old standby. This was the most downloaded brush I ever made before I joined Adobe, over 1 million downloads. The Animator pencil. And it's just a nice pencil to draw with. I like it. Okay.
Well, it looks very pencilish.
Good. That's the goal. Mission accomplished. All right. So for drawing a sketch, I have to think of something with flame. Now, this could go any direction. I don't want to go anywhere dark. I don't want to have somebody's poor house, you know, burning down or anything like that. I do think it's fun to do something more of a fantasy kind of an area. Oh, look, the same thing happened. Isn't that weird? Look at that. My brush switched to a mixer brush. How bizarre. Let's see if I can fix that just by using the Shift key. Yep, I did it. There we go.
Oh, okay.
Isn't that interesting? We had this weird glitch earlier when we were getting ready for the stream, folks, where my brush just went from the regular brush tool to the mixer brush tool, and I couldn't figure out what was causing that. But anyway, but yeah, so I was thinking about more sort of a fantasy thing, and maybe some character that can generate flames with their hands. Or also I was thinking about maybe somebody who's walking through a cave with a torch, something like that. These are kind of interesting ideas. Another idea I had was a character made out of flames, nothing like the Human Torch from Marvel Comics, but maybe something a little cuter. So these are some of the things I was thinking about. If anything I just said makes any of you out there think, yeah, I want to see that, then why don't we'll take a moment here. I know there's a little delay, but we can see if anyone has anything to say about it in the chat. And if there are any sort of strong feelings one way or the other, I'm happy to go that route.
Yeah, let's hear it. But in the meantime, I will also give you some feedback about some ideas. Sean says, make a flaming hamburger menu out of a hamburger.
Wait, a hamburger
Julia says,
out of a hamburger.
Flaming lips, which is also
a good idea.
Oh, a phoenix. Oh, and Emma is here as well. Hello, Emma. And also
bonjour, Emma.
So Melanie has joined. Hello, Melanie. Julia has also joined. Hello. And by the way, again, if you are watching this on YouTube, hop over on Behance, because that's where the magic happens, and this is where the chat is. So if you're wondering why we're reading all this feedback and ideas, then this is happening on Behance. All right, let's see. Emma says, of course, bonjour, bonjour. Sandrine, legacy brushes, flaming lips, get some love. All right. Any favorites onto what Kyle recommended or had as an idea, which direction we should go? Tim likes the dark cave idea. Of course, Tim.
I do too. Cave. I'm sort of leaning that way, but I wanted to know if anyone had strong feelings any other way. But it could give us an interesting
Can we hear the options again, says Melanie?
Oh yeah, sure. So there was this someone in maybe in a dark environment like a cave or something holding a torch and walking through some kind of fantasy thing. I thought maybe that could be like an action character of some kind, like a not like a hobbit, but you know, that kind of thing. Some character on a quest with a torch walking through a dark, scary place. The other one was like an actual character made out of flames, you know, like a little more cute, I think, though. And the third option was like a character who is more sort of superhero, like can generate flames from their hands or something like that. So,
Mm-hmm.
but I think the cave is it look. Oh, we have okay. Sandrine also agreeing the dark cave goes well with Halloween, so I like that.
True.
I agree with that. Um, oh, more caves. Okay, sounds good. I
Oliver
guess the
says
cave is
flame in a
winning.
cave. So I think we have a winner. Yeah. Melanie says character on a quest.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so there we go. Now we're okay.
So
We got it. We got it. All right. We got it.
maybe a character on a quest in the dark cave.
That's it. That's what we're doing. Okay. All right. So let me see here. I could just figure this out. And I'll just have this hand here. Holding the torch. And we'll have the character looking up this way. There we go. And this is going to be our sort of hero character here. And
I like it already.
Oh, thanks. Thank you. Remember, you know, with these kinds of things, the idea is you got to kind of work loose. You know, you don't want to get too tight too soon. So like, I'll figure this out later. But first I want to get sort of like the pose here. So we're kind of walking through.
I like that the character looks up. It, you know, gives you a little bit of suspense, and you don't know why the character looks up. Maybe there's something going on. Maybe there was a sound, or
could be something there. So we'll have the
Sandrine says, "Mind the snakes." Uh-oh. Oh no, snakes and spiders.
Oh, you know, we got plenty of spiders here where I live, that's for sure. That's something I do not enjoy very much, but it is what it is. Can't do anything about it. North Carolina, spiders like it. It's nice and humid. So they are happy here.
Okay.
All right, so this is going to be sort of the shape for the, sometimes I like to think of sort of like a line of action. And like this sort of S curve here for the body. Maybe this leg steps out further or up onto something. You know, there's all kinds of options, and this is what you can do in a sketch phase, is play with all of these choices that you can make. You don't have to commit to anything. I think
you know, this reminds me of one epiphany moment that I had when I was I joined like a workshop which was done by one of the Pixar artists about
Oh,
illustration and storytelling, and you know, it was a lot of sketching, but a lot of story, how you set up a story and hero's journey and all that kind of stuff. But
yeah.
it was also about when you do scribbles and sketches, and one thing that really stuck with me was what like when he said, "Don't draw nouns, but draw verbs."
Oh, that's cool. I've never
So
heard that.
don't just draw a person just standing stiff like that, or just, but
Mm,
draw him, you know, holding something or doing something, or yelling or screaming or jumping or running, or you know, whatever. But you know, draw something that can be described like he or she does this or that. Um,
great advice.
and it was very intriguing because once you understand that, I thought it was really interesting to see a couple of drawings, especially like concept art, where it is always describing an action that is happening, and it's not like a T-pose of a character or something, but it's rather the, you know, the person or the character or the figure doing something.
Yeah.
um, so maybe I
I,
just thought
I
I can
love
share that
I
from.
love that advice, and I've never heard it put that way, but that is so true. And I'm going to remember that because I will pass that on when I'm explaining these things as well. It's such a good way to put it. And I just never heard it put that succinctly. It's a perfect way of explaining what it is that you're doing to try and sell not just the idea of the character
Mm.
design or whatever you're doing, but this you're telling a bit of the story, and of course that makes everything more interesting for the person looking at the work. Obviously, that's a great way of putting it.
I think it was Matthew Loon, that was his name, if I recall correctly. He used to be
Matthew Loon.
yeah, he used to
Okay.
be a story artist at Pixar. I think he left already, but he's doing workshops now, and he was like one of the main guys for the Toy Story films and stuff like that. So
Toy
uh,
Story. I think I've heard of that one.
he's a great guy. So that was some good advice right there.
I should think so. Yeah, that's great. That could just, I love when somebody who's been doing something a long time, like this Matthew character, um, has a way of summarizing a big idea or an important idea in just a sentence, and it just comes from that experience they have. That's always such a cool thing, if you go to attend some kind of a lecture by somebody who's been
Hmm.
doing something for a long time, they always have a cool way of sort of summarizing a big important idea. And I think that's only possible because of their breadth of experience and all the time they've
Hmm.
been doing it. But it's always a neat thing to hear someone talk like that. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, I heard an interview with John Legend, the musician,
Hmm.
not too long ago, and he said something which he said he can't take credit for it because he had heard it somewhere else. But I'm going to give him credit because he's the first person I heard say it. But I mean, I can tell that maybe it wasn't original, but still, it was such a cool idea. He said, luck was when preparation meets opportunity.
Hmm.
I'd never heard it put exactly like that, but I think that's totally true. So if you're doing the work to be ready for when the opportunity arises where something could work out,
Hmm.
then you're set. And that's really, what people refer to often as luck. They couldn't have taken advantage of the situation when it presented itself if they hadn't
Hmm.
been prepared, right? With some skill set of some kind or whatever.
That's a very good tip.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
never heard that. I like that too.
Um, Speaking of techniques, are you're still drawing on the same layer you initially started out, right?
Yes, correct. This is all the same stuff.
Okay.
And I'll just have a separate layer for inking when I get to
Hmm.
it. And yeah, that'll kind of be it. It's going to be really simple. Nothing fancy.
Are you always drawing in the pre-sketch? Are you always drawing it in black? Because you know there's some people that do it in
Uh,
like a bright blue color or like a greenish, or I mean,
I
of course
love,
you
yeah,
can color it in.
I love doing red and blue. Sometimes
Okay.
red, sometimes blue. That's really fun.
Okay.
And look, we could even just do that. Isn't that what's so great about working digitally? I can just do that, just make it more blue. And there's a way to work, and I just lock my layer transparency and then hold down Option and then hit delete to fill with the foreground color. Or maybe we say, oh, I like red better, and we can move to red. It's whatever you want.
Quick question here from the chat. Jane asks, I still use a lot of legacy brushes in Photoshop, the ones with the tips that worn out, for example. Is there any way to create ones from scratch now instead of tweaking the existing ones?
To create brushes in Photoshop? I think that's the question. Oh, yeah, you can make as many brushes as you want. You can make 1 million. It's up to you. To make a brush, you just do this. You just make a shape.
The ones with the tips that worn out, for example. I'm not sure.
Oh, erodible tips. Those are erodible tip brushes.
Ah, okay.
They're a specific category of mixer brush. You can assign a brush stamp to those, I believe. And the easiest way to do that would be and I'll just show you with an existing mixer brush. If I were to grab in the drawing box the tilter, or actually, well, the latest ones that were created, actually, I think I did use, a custom tip, but I can't remember. And maybe I'm remembering this wrong, but I'm pretty sure you can assign one. The winter 2022 brushes, here we go. So there were 3 pencils in there: Tilty Pencil Rough, Tilty Pencil Soft, and Variant. And these are really nice for drawing. They allow you to shade with the side of the pencil and use the tip and all this. So they're a specific category of mixer brush. Very nice to draw with. And if you look at the brush settings, you'll notice that here, there is a group of options you normally wouldn't see with regular brushes, and this is for erodible tip brushes. You actually have the option here to make it so that the tip of the pencil will eventually get softer and get worn down, and then you have to sharpen it again. I think this was Photoshop engineers back in 2000, and I think these came out around, I want to say 2008, 7, no, sooner, earlier than that, 2005, maybe, something like that. When CS5 came out is when they introduced these. So whenever that came out. I think they were just having fun. Like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if the tip eroded? And I think they didn't really consider that most artists don't want that to happen in a digital environment. That's why they're working digitally. They don't want to sharpen their pencil, but it's possible. But anyway, they are a mixer brush, and they do respond to tilt differently from normal brushes. They give you a much wider range of tilt, which is actually something I wish existed for all the brushes. Unfortunately, it doesn't. Now here under brush tip shape, you'll see I've got a bunch of stuff I've made here, more than most folks. I think you can assign a shape to it. Let's see what happens if I try. Nope, you can't. So I take it back. The shape is fixed. It's whatever it is, but the things you have to change are the texture and how it responds to texture. So if I just go back for a moment, here's a tilty pencil, and we go to our brush settings. You'll see the things that I've done are changed, for example, scattering, and then custom texture, and things like that. But the shape, I think, is locked. And I think the reason it's locked is because of that range of tilt it offers. It's only possible to do that with the preset that the engineers put in there. But that is actually, not to give away everything we're doing, but we actually have the ability now in Fresco to use this exact same kind of tilt behavior for any Photoshop brush. It's called True Tilt, and it's going to be released, I want to say Max Time, which is in like a couple weeks.
Okay.
So you'll be able to take any brush that you like and apply this same tilting behavior to it. So if you have a pencil you like, for example, you can assign it to that. not only that, but I designed 9 new pencils for fresco that are going to be released that all take advantage of true tilts.
Oh,
And
sweet.
yeah, they're
No,
really
that's a tease, and that's also a great shout out for Adobe Max. So if you haven't registered for that, feel free to sign up.
yeah.
Speaking of Fresco, there was another question in here from Jackie. If there's a way to get brushes back into Fresco that have disappeared, like the 1960s background brushes.
They disappeared. I'm not sure why they disappeared. The 60s background brushes were from one of the updates. You should be able to in Fresco just go to the bottom of your brushes list when you tap on a brush, the pixel brush icon, and it pulls up your list of brushes. At the bottom, there's a little plus sign. Where you can add more brushes, and 2 of the categories there, one is import brushes, so you can import them from a file, but the other one is discover new brushes. If you tap on that, it'll take you to that same list of all the brushes that exist, including the 1960s background brushes, which were, I believe, in like the spring 2019 brush set or something like that. Pardon me for not knowing exactly where they were, but I'm pretty sure that was it. So somebody might want to fact check me on that, but I'm not sure why they would disappear. Your library should remain constant.
It's the gouache brushes. I'm just looking at it. It's like on the second row, inspired by the Golden Books artists in the 60s.
Yeah. Oh, gouache. Those are the gouache G brushes, and they're in the gouache set. So you can install that gouache set in Fresco if you want.
Yeah,
brushes
maybe that
should not disappear, but if they did, that's a bug, which should be reported for sure. I've never had brushes disappear on me in Fresco. That's certainly not a desirable behavior. I'd like to know why.
There's also another one that features 60s and 50s brushes, which is the Winter Brushes 2022. So quite recent.
Oh, those have those have trees and shapes, graphic shapes you can paint with that
okay.
are meant to look like trees. And they're inspired by sort of advertising art and greeting card art mid-century, as well as a few like old cartoons and things. Yeah, that's what that is.
All right. People are saying that we're grilling you, Kyle. So
not at all.
we're
here
not
to
gonna
answer
put
your
you on the
question. That's
spot.
my job.
Exactly. So I think it's all good. Don't worry. All right, cool. So if there's any other questions, feel free to shout them out. I try to keep them here up to date. We have a lot of action going on in the chat, which is great.
Great.
Community is very active today. So
I love it. That's what we want.
And while we were at it, I downloaded the mega pack. Now I must admit I didn't have it. So
oh no.
I mean, unfortunately, I don't get to draw as much as I would like to. I originate from drawing. That's where it started with me, with being creative.
Yes.
So I drew a lot. I mean, I can still draw, but obviously not as good as you, because I'm missing the practice. You know, that's the thing with drawing. You lose the muscle memory a little bit if you don't practice it every day. And it's a bummer because I would love to draw more. And every time I see someone draw, I'm like, I'm gonna draw more. and then I'm doing it for a couple of days, and then I forget about it again. Or sometimes the projects don't need me to draw, because it's either enough to make it really rough, like not a proper drawing, but just like really, really rough outline of what you want to do, and then move on with the next phase of the project. So yeah.
Well, it's very much like playing an instrument, I think, you made that comment about like muscle memory and memory, and I think playing an instrument, keeping up your drawing chops, these are things that are closely related, for sure. Now here I want to do a little cuff up there. I just want to part of this stuff is like sort of decisions about how to design a character and their clothing and stuff, and that's always something that I'm always thinking about that, and I'm not like that's something I need to work on as well. Like, you know, making those shapes work, making them good can be hard. Okay, so, and this is going to be a glove right there. And we're going to have a glove right there. I like gloves.
I forgot who it was. I can't find the comment on the chat, but someone was writing, drawing hands like it's nothing, which
Oh,
which is meant as a compliment, which I agree on because hands
thank
are
you.
so difficult.
Thanks. I taught life drawing for 12 years, so hopefully I can still, yeah, I hope I can still, you know, I mean, I make mistakes, but I try and remember some of the stuff I knew from that. And
Especially perspectively distorted hands are super difficult. I find it, like I remember that when I was doing live drawing
oh
classes,
yeah,
it was always the most difficult, to have a hand that is like this, like if you look at the video,
yeah. So, you know, the
that's
thing is to
crazy
always think in
difficult.
3 dimensions. So you
Yeah.
do this, put the fingertips here. 1, 2, 3, 4, you know, and then kind of work your way back from there. They're like little sausages. A sausage, 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 you know. Put this one lower. There we go. And then you got knuckles, 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 and then, you know, eventually you get to where that's kind of
Hmm.
the shape.
That's so good.
And, you know, that's kind of it. So you get the idea.
Hmm.
But I think you can use these kinds of tricks to find your way through stuff that's a little bit weird shape wise. You know,
Hmm.
I rely on these tricks all the time. I usually can't just sort of invent it that
Another
well.
another thing that it's like my mind is going down the memory lane now of design class and live drawing classes that I had.
Yeah.
That one thing that I remember now, seeing you draw is another. It's not a quote. It's a thing that my teacher told me was, let the line find the shape for you. So
Hmm.
basically, you do multiple lines, and if you don't have, if the line doesn't sit there exactly where you actually want it, you can draw over and narrow it down, like go lower or go higher, and um,
Yeah.
that's why you do multiple strokes until you find the one stroke where you go like, all right, this is probably the one, and then you emphasize that stroke with a thicker line again.
Mm-hmm.
I found that also very liberating and helpful. I mean, of course, the better you draw, sometimes it's just like the first stroke that sits perfectly there. But sometimes the line needs to find the shape.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's my professors used to call that searching.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and I think it's exactly the same idea, isn't it? And yeah, that's certainly necessary if you're gonna get a drawing to work. Whoops, I was drawing on 2 separate layers. I'll just combine those and we'll knock that opacity back. And we will save. There we go. I know things are being auto-saved, but I always like to just make a habit of saving. All right, so here we go. This is our little sketch. And we have some time together, right? How long is this? This goes for at least another 45, 50 minutes?
Yeah, we have an hour left. Actually, 45 minutes. Sorry. Yeah.
Should be plenty of time. You know, I don't always spend a ton of time on the sketch, but sometimes I do. And in this case, you know, I wanted to get as many shapes right as I could. And there's some things I want to think about, like I didn't really address. Maybe like what would this area look like here? Maybe, you know, because this is a person who's on some kind of adventure, they would have a bag of some kind, you know, so maybe we could think about having like a strap come across here. Just to kind of break up that area and make it a little bit more interesting. And that could come around the back, and maybe there could be like a a pack of some kind up on their back here. Could put a little something there. That might be kind of a good detail.
Did you save the file yet, Kyle?
I sure did.
Okay. I was probably reading while I didn't see that because Sean says, save on a stream. What is this magic? Sandrine says, I knew some drawing tutors who would chastise you for shaping with multiple small strokes.
Yes, I agree with that. And I did the same to my students. I was very mean about it. If you have to draw an ellipse, for example, this is what you do. You keep your hand moving.
Mm-hmm.
And you just try and sort of find what that should look like this. You do not do this, like try and like sketch. You know what I mean? This kind of thing loses the energy, loses the flow, loses the general gesture of the whole thing. So that goes for anything you're drawing. If you're drawing an arm and you're trying to get the length of the arm and the angle of the arm, and you do something like this, right, to get the whole thing, that's a good thing to do. Draw and restate, but try and hit longer lines if possible, as opposed to trying to work it out with tiny little sketchy bits like that. Just that's a good habit.
It's a good tip.
Yeah, and you'll actually notice a huge difference with your drawings if you start to do that, because they will, at the end of the day, if you remember when I was sketching early on, a lot of the longer lines I was making to try and find, rhythms and proportions and things like that. What should happen is that should kind of come through in the final work. You should sort of notice that there is a nice kind of energy to it all, that has a flow through the drawing, through the shapes, nice flow. And doesn't always work out, but you can always restate it and then get it to work.
Draw from the shoulder, they would say. That's what Sandrine says, which is pretty much accurate.
And I'm drawing on a Cintiq, which it's not the biggest. It's 22, not 24, but it's big enough for me to do this. I can sweep. And that's the same. And then even when I'm drawing at a smaller scale, I'm trying to sort of lock my wrist a little bit and hit it more with the larger muscles of the arm. And that gives me stability, and it gives me the ability to hit stuff a little bit more confidently. Anyway.
There's one question from David. He says, hi, Kyle. What exercises do you do in other to help you build this level of dexterity?
I don't have time anymore really to do a lot of exercises. I think what I do is I just draw so frequently that's enough. It is the exercise, I guess. I'm always drawing something. I'm addicted to drawing. So if I'm sitting around and nothing's going on, now especially with Fresco, because the iPad is so portable, and my wife can attest to this, the kids have gone to bed and she's getting ready and stuff like that for bed. I'm sometimes sitting there just drawing for 20 minutes, nothing for work, nothing for anything other than just pure enjoyment, sitting there and drawing. That's a lot of the stuff I post on Instagram is stuff I'll do in like 20 or 30 minutes just because I'm playing around, which is why a lot of it doesn't ever have a lot of polish or look like a finished illustration for any real purpose. A lot of the stuff I do is just kind of, look, I made a thing. That's where those things happen. So I think just that daily habitual drawing is enough to get me there. But prior to that, when I was younger, I read a lot of books and copied from books, and I copied a lot from comics, and I was just a huge fan of comics work, like so many people, and yeah, I don't know what else to say. I just was always drawing. So also you have to have good mentors and good influences, and if you find someone who really knows what they're talking about, they can change the way you think about drawing with just a sentence or two. We said that earlier about that Pixar fellow, Matthew, I think he said, like, a comment like that can really be worth its weight in gold because it just shifts your thinking and shifts your technique.
Hmm.
It's that whole idea of when something clicks. So you may have been drawing hands for a long time, and then suddenly the anatomy of the hand, you're like, oh, I get it. There's, like the knuckles are in a curved pattern. Like that was something I remember when I was years and years ago when someone pointed out to me that, this is a shape for the pattern of the knuckles or the fingers on the hand. Like when they said that to me, it just sort of was one of those things that clicked. If you're looking at a hand from the front, like you did a moment ago, that they're not lined up straight.
Hmm.
There's a curve there, and that just something like that even is just, oh, it clicks, and then you never again see it the same way. You never again draw it the same way. It makes a big difference.
But that goes back to a very fundamental thing that I remember also very fondly, and like one of the biggest epiphanies in my learning experiences in school was, it's not about drawing, it's about seeing or learning to see.
Yes, 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 yes.
Like it sounds so cliche, I think, especially in the art community, I would suppose, but it really is true, because it's really about inspecting things, and this applies even further. I do a lot of 3D stuff and 3D work, but it applies there as well. You have to really see and understand, how does the light give a contour to a shape, or how does it go over an object. But it also goes deeper in terms of like seeing, in terms of understanding. So for example, for this character, I mean, it's quite obvious that you understand the anatomy of the character. There's flesh and bone under the texture and under the clothing. So it's also part of seeing and understanding, like, oh, why is this wrinkle there? Why does the cloth fall the way it falls? Is because you see, and you school your eye to understand, like, this is how this happens. And then you learn it. You basically, you fill your brain with this information, and then you can just pull down or pull out this information from your mind that you memorized by starting to see instead of just watch. I
Yeah,
think
it's
that
all
was
about that observation stuff is so important.
observation. That's the word. Yeah.
Yeah, but also I think there's a tendency for everybody when they're starting out, or even when they're not starting out, just if you're
Mm-hmm.
drawing for a long time, you still do it a lot, is to you rely on your library of visual symbols. So if I say to you, for example, draw an eye, a lot of people say, okay, I'll draw an eye. They do an almond shape with a circle.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a visual symbol for eyes that we all recognize. But if I said, no, it's got to be more sort of three-quarter view, and you're then having to, do something more like this,
Mm-hmm.
that's something I think that until you've done it a bunch of times and observed it a bunch of times, it's not as easy to do, because you haven't understood that thing you're really looking at in 3 dimensions, like you mentioned, and you haven't figured out what it looks like from different angles, and how to sort of work that out in your mind.
Mm-hmm.
And spin it around and draw it. And so the visual symbols thing can be like a hindrance to accuracy, and to also giving you the ability to draw things from different angles and make a more interesting story.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's
It's a
definitely something people need to work on as well.
very good point.
Visual symbols. All right, so the brush I'm inking with, by the way, now, this is the Belgian Comics. In the ink box, there's also a version of this in Fresco in the inking tools. It's sort of like one of the nice defaults. I liked it so much, I wanted to create a version of it for Fresco, and there are a couple of brushes in Fresco that are based on brushes from my other sets. And they're mostly like the ones that I had heard from, people they used a lot. So I thought, yeah, it'd be good to have some of these in fresco. Now, most of them though have a slight variation to them. You know, I'm always picky, and I'm changing my brushes constantly. So like, you know, brushes I made a few years ago, I'll sometimes revisit them and I'll be like, oh, you know, I wish this did this differently. And I'll go ahead and make some change to it. And then either release it as a new one or just keep it to myself to do something that I need to do. But I do get very picky. And like everybody, you know how you look at old drawings you've done, and you're like, ugh, that's pretty bad. There are a lot of brushes I made back in like, say, 2014, when I was just kind of really getting started with the business of making and selling brushes, that I look at them now and I just cringe, because I just think, oh, this could be so much better. But then the funny thing is that with tools, people get used to using a tool and they love it. And so when I was going to make these brushes part of the Adobe brush collection back in 2017, I was going to get rid of all these brushes that I just thought weren't good. And I was told, no, don't do that, because there are bound to be people out there who love those. And I'm so glad I listened, because it's true. There are people who love brushes that I hate. And that's just the way it is. You can't, you know, everyone likes different stuff. So I might think it's, you know, not a good brush, but that's just because it didn't do the thing I wanted it to do on the outset, right? But for somebody else, it did exactly what they wanted it to do. So they want it. So I learned there to just, you know, not worry about it. There are so many brushes that if someone will find what they like, and I don't have to sweat it, I don't have to worry about it, you know. So here's the thing about this brush. This brush was inspired by the work of people like Uderzo, who is the artist on Asterix. People like Peyo and Franquin, and these Franco-Belgian artists who I love. There's this nice quality to their line work that I just find so energetic and rich, and just it feels like they're just hitting the line right every time. And I wish I could find better video of these artists working. There are a few videos you can find on YouTube of like some of these people drawing, but most of them are like little demos they're doing of just a character, and you don't even really get to see how they work. But I've always just thought, man, it'd be so great to see them really doing their thing and watch how they wield a brush, because a lot of what they did was actually done with brushes and ink, not pens. And it'd just be so cool to see them work. I love watching other people draw. I don't know. I mean, I guess if people are tuning into this, maybe they also like that because I'm drawing and they're watching. But hopefully also you have questions and you want to know things about Photoshop and brushes and all that. But also maybe just it's fun to watch someone draw. So
it's definitely fun to watch. I'm trying to draw and monitor the chat and watch you, but it's difficult.
That's a lot. Yeah.
Daryl says, my drawing tutor reminds me to see the body as pieces of jigsaw that you are trying to fit together, which is also, I think, a very interesting take.
Yeah, sure. Makes sense. Absolutely. I would say that's part of it. And then also you have to be careful not to lose in the parts, to lose the whole, and to lose sort of the one of the nice things about drawing the body is that sort of feeling of an overall line of action, a rhythm, of a fluidity to a pose that you can only sort of really capture in a drawing, because I think that's one of the things that art does really well, is it takes reality and makes it way more beautiful and lyrical and just more sort of oh, I'm thinking like music, like passages in music where things just flow into one other thing, and there are these nice smooth transitions from one passage to another. I think you can really exaggerate that in drawing and painting, and you can simplify things in a way that makes them really lovely to look at. And I think you have to be careful when, if you are thinking about the jigsaw pieces, to not make things feel too separated from one another that you lose that. Hope I'm having a hard time saying this, but I hope that makes sense.
Oh, totally.
Okay, good. All right, and here, think about how things sort of fold, and this is always the trick, like to make with clothing and stuff like that, to try and make it look like it's wrapped around a form, you know, like there's anatomy underneath the clothing. You had mentioned that a moment ago, and I'm thinking about that here.
I like the stitches on the seams.
Thank you.
So it looks like a little, you know, like a adventure outfit.
Yeah.
It puts it into a certain time, as well as you know, a certain category of clothing. So you know, he's like a adventurer, and you know, maybe not like a prince or something, at least not from a,
right. No, he's not royalty.
He's not royalty, exactly. Like no shiny armor, you know.
All right, there we go. That's a nice boot. Happy with that boot. All right. Yeah, we're getting there. We're doing well here. And how are we doing on time? I always like to do a little time check. Are we okay?
We have about 30 minutes, pretty sharp.
Good. Okay. I don't feel like too much rush here sometimes I'm like, uh-oh, better move. And then I really
I keep interrupting you with questions and discussions.
No, it's good. Speaking of which, yeah, if anybody has any questions in the chat about what I'm doing, or just about drawing in general, about inking, about, you know, I haven't actually been talking too much about inking, and inking is one of those things that it's a very specific kind of drawing, isn't it? I mean, you're basically not given the option to describe things with any value other than it's either on or off. It's black or it's nothing. And so how do you work around that? So it depends on the style, but this can be very challenging for people, rightfully so. Like everybody else, I'm always thinking about it and worrying about doing it well. And in the case where I'm using a brush like this, it's kind of got a lot of weight to it, this brush. You know, you can really kind of chunk stuff out like that. You can also still get some fine work, but some of the things I'm thinking about, just to think out loud so you all know, decisions I'm making, are line weight. I'm thinking about where do I want to sort of beef things up and make things heavier. Okay. You know, where do I want to just go for a pure black shape, like here under the head, where we have this something he's wearing underneath this, I think the word is tunic. Where do I want to just like throw a shadow right here under an arm or something, and let that be a black shape. You know, I could even extend that to the backpack he's carrying there, something like that. A lot of this stuff is intuitive, and a lot of this stuff is more based on experience, like knowing that underneath an area where something folds over another, you know, sometimes to add a little bit of a shadow there, even though it's just pure black, right, is a good thing. It can make it feel like there's more dimension in the drawing. It can make you more clearly understand what's on top of what is layering over what, and things like that. But these can be tricky decisions. I struggle with them all the time. I'm lucky and spoiled that I'm working digitally when I usually do this stuff, because there's no going back. With ink, you make a mark and that's it. I can try something, and if I don't like the way it looks, I can just undo it. But that's not an option when you're working traditionally, really, unless you want to use whiteout.
However, one thing that is I think super important to understand is it doesn't really matter if you work digitally or analog, because if you cannot draw, you cannot draw digitally or analog.
Right.
If you can draw, you can draw digitally as well as analog. So it really is just a tool that has its benefits, obviously. But it's not like, oh, you can learn drawing better or faster because it's either digital or analog.
True.
Drawing, I would say, drawing is independent from either digital or analog, because it's just drawing. It's about how you move the pen, no matter if it's digital or analog. That being said, there's a couple of questions from multiple people, like, where is the best? How can I learn to draw? Basically, is there someone to teach you how to draw?
Oh my gosh.
So it's a deep topic. Do you want to go ahead, or should I say a couple of things?
Well, you go ahead and then I'll chime in.
Okay. So I let you draw while I babble here. So there's been some discussion and some tips towards that, which is basically echoing what I'm thinking. And the best thing that I can recommend is go to live drawing class. There's multiple live drawing classes, literally in every somewhat bigger city, that you can just apply for or just go. And I don't know if they take a fee or not these days. I had it in design school, but basically live drawing allows you to just draw, sit there for an hour or two, and just draw the person that is sitting or standing in front of you. And sometimes they have like speed drawings where it's like 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, depending on the class. It really forces you to be quick about, first of all, finding the shape, but also schooling your eye and learning to see perspectives and proportions and all this type of things. So that's probably the easiest, just by going in there. And of course, at some point you need a teacher that gives you, or someone that directs you, and like, hey, you're doing this wrong, or you're doing this wrong, or this is good or bad. But this is one tip that I can share. So up to you, Kai.
I definitely agree with that. Life drawing is a really superb way to draw learn how to draw anything, because if you can draw a body, then you've already learned all the other stuff, because bodies contain all of the challenges that you're going to face if you're trying to draw a car or trying to draw an elephant or draw whatever it happens to be. And these are all the same ingredients no matter what you're drawing. And these things are proportion. Okay. And with proportion, you're also thinking about, learning how to measure accurately. And I don't mean like getting out a ruler and doing this, but with your eyes, like seeing the differences between the sizes of things. You're also going to understand how to look for angles. So, is that arm at this angle? Is it at this angle? Is it somewhere in between? Things like that. What's in relationship to something else angle-wise? So, for example, if I were to have been studying this figure in a life drawing class, I might have looked for something where I could compare, for example, how do I place this arm in the right spot? And things I would do is I would sort of line things up. And this is alignment, which is related to proportion, but not quite the same, but it's something you start to learn how to do, where I look at how this crosses over the chest and then sits just slightly above where this arm bends. So learning how to see where things sit horizontally and vertically across your composition, across whatever it is you're studying, this is very important. Where do things line up? For example, this eye, I can say lines up right above that knee. So being able to position things like that, you look for landmarks in the subject matter, you look for things like that. When I talk about angles, because the horizontal and vertical are always great things to start with and ways to line things up. Then you're thinking about stuff like this, where I'm going from the elbow across the knee here. This whole area roughly is about a 45-degree angle, maybe a little less. Looking for stuff like that and then learning how to see it more and more quickly and more accurately. These are the things you're going to have to do when you're drawing a person, whether you're drawing a car, whether you're drawing an elephant. Again, with same examples I always give. Then you start to get into like technique, and the technique comes later. I think the most important thing is first learning how to see and draw things accurately. So you observe and then you record, and the recording of what you observe, when the shapes and the sizes of things start to line up and look right, then you move on to things like technique, which is what I'm doing right now is more of a technique thing where I'm choosing carefully, when to use a thicker line, a thinner line, how to have something taper, thin to thick and back again, start thick, taper thin. And a lot of this also comes down to the brush and what I can do with it or not, or can't do with it. So you can see that I have less control with a brush like this than I would with, say, if I go to the clean as a whistle brush. So the clean as a whistle, if I want to go thin to thick, I have a lot more. Well, actually, I think I changed my Wacom settings. For those of you who are interested in this kind of stuff, if you go to your settings for your device, I have my settings set right now to a soft feel. And if I set them more to a firm feel like this, okay, and then pop over back to Photoshop, I now have a lot more control over thick to thin than I did a moment ago. And these are the kinds of things to learn about with your digital drawing, is that you can control how it feels to draw with something just by going into the driver settings for your Wacom device or whatever. You can do the same thing with Fresco. You can go to the pressure settings for the brushes, and you'll find that in the brush settings panel as well as in the general settings for Fresco. So if you go to more of a firm feel, you can really bear down, and you can go from thin to thick and have a lot of control. But it also is going to mean you're going to have to use more pressure to draw in general. For a brush like the the Belgian Comics, for me, it feels good to draw on a little bit of a lighter side, or somewhere in the middle. So I think that's down to the individual, what feels good for your hand, but you can make these adjustments. But technique wise, yeah, I'm thinking about thick to thin. I'm thinking about all these kinds of things. And that's going to make a difference in why your drawing looks more or less, quote unquote, professional or sort of, polished than your earlier work. And these techniques can be learned simply through time. And, but, quickly just covering them. Yeah, line weight is one, right? The length of a line, it's always to have a nice big line here that covers that whole area is great. Having decisions about when to connect a line or not to connect a line. A lot of this is purely down to style and taste. But a lot of it's also down to the tool. When you have a brush that can give you thicker, chunkier lines, sometimes that separation, like right here, is a good thing. You can leave that space open and it just feels right. I don't know how to explain it. But if you're using a much thinner inking tool, sometimes you want to connect. If you look at the work of someone like Hergé, who did Tintin, I'll go find a technical pen. So like if you're working,
everything is connected with Hergé, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Clarity over everything and everything connected. A brush like the Tech Pen Tilt will give you more of that kind of thing where you feel this urge to make everything, connect. And
Mm-hmm.
this is just a different way of working. Like every single shape I make has a nice clean connection. So this is a different kind of inking because there's really almost no variation in the line weight. There's a
Mm-hmm.
unified weight. And so then you have to think about like ways to make that more interesting with the shape language that you use. And you also want your shapes to be really clean. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? And when you do that, you're thinking differently. So these are all different vocabularies basically, and you learn them. You learn them like languages, like different vocab.
What's your take on, because for example, maybe that was a mistake, I don't know, but I initially I also learned a lot from books, but also draw from photos. Like have a photo on the side and just draw that. And my teachers told me that's wrong, because the photo is taking over the seeing part for you, because the perspective is already translated from 3D to 2D on a side-by-side image. So I mean, sometimes I mean, I don't know what I mean. Honestly, I would be interested to hear what your take is on drawing, let's say, a photo like side by side. I mean, it does take away some of the learning that you need to
I
to
get what they're
um,
saying. I was told the same thing, but I honestly don't. I don't think anyone needs to be that strict about it.
mhm,
I think any reference you have, if you want to draw from it, is great, and you're going to learn from that reference. And the only reason it's a little better to draw from observation is, yeah, then you're learning that skill of flattening something from 3D to 2D and
mhm,
understanding how to
mhm,
effectively draw something that has overlapping parts and that sits in a space in 3 dimensions and like communicate that in a way. But a lot of that, I think, you can also learn from photography if you know what you're doing. And
mhm,
maybe I think photography is extremely useful for shapes, trying to just understand how things are put together and what is the shape language of something. And the amazing thing you'll find, all of you, anyone out there learning how to draw, and I do this, but the first thing I do with all my students for the drawing one class I used to teach. So these are students who are coming in, it's their first college level drawing class, is what I would do is say, okay, everybody, get out a piece of paper, and roughly at about like a 6-inch square area, I want you to draw a goose facing to the right. So it's a goose in profile, the whole body of a goose facing to the right with one leg lifted off the ground slightly. And everyone freaks out. They go, I don't know how to draw a goose. I say, just go ahead and do it. And everyone draws their attempt at a goose. And then I give them a photo reference of a goose that's been simplified very much into like a grayscale image, very easy to
mhm,
look at. I say, okay, now copy this goose, and I'm going to show you how to copy it. And I then demo that thing we just talked about with lines and angles and alignment. And the head of the goose is just over the tip of the foot that's raised, and the body of the goose sits exactly halfway, the back of the goose between the top of the head and the bottom of the feet. We're looking at all these proportions and alignment. I give a quick demonstration of that. They do that drawing. Of course, it's far superior to the first. Then they put the photo away and they put the first 2 drawings away, and they draw the goose again a third time from memory. And what they're always so surprised by is how good that third drawing is. Now, they've only done 2 drawings of a goose, one purely from imagination, the second from observation. By the time they draw that third goose, you could show it to anybody, and it is a darn good goose, and it looks like a goose, and it's proportionate. And
mhm,
what I'm trying to get them to understand in that very first lesson is how much the brain can really get from that small bit of
mhm,
observation, but also from observing it in a methodical way where you're looking at alignment, looking at proportion, looking at angles. That gets retained. And then the crazy thing is, at the end of the semester, I can say to them, draw a goose facing right, 1 foot raised. They still got it. They can draw that
mhm,
goose. So I think what this does is it demystifies the drawing process. It also helps people to have more confidence and faith in their ability to retain the information when they draw it. It's one thing to look at something and think, I'll draw that later. That doesn't
mhm.
work. But if you draw something just one time and you're really studying it while you're drawing it, you'd be amazed how much you remember, an hour later, a week later, even 6 months later. It's kind of amazing.
That's a very good point, and it becomes kind of like a core memory, like a core drawing memory. And and I believe the more you have, it's almost like building up an internal library.
Yes.
So, for example, I'm pretty sure you drew a very similar hand holding a sword or a stick
Yes.
or you know, something on like his left hand, and the same applies for the right hand. I'm sure you drew, I don't know, maybe 100 hands that are kind of like in this lower angled position. So the more you, I mean, basically, I remember this because I was drawing a lot of hands holding a sword because I was drawing a lot of medieval stuff back as a kid,
Hmm.
lightsabers and all that kind of stuff. So I still pretty much can draw a hand that is holding something
Right.
because you memorize it's like the same with the goose. So I totally agree. I think it's fascinating that you put it into words. But what is up there in your mind?
It works. I mean, we really have brains are amazing, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I can remember the words to like dozens of 1980s cartoons, the openings, stupid opening songs, or you know, and like commercials from when I was a kid. Like, why do I remember that stupid stuff? It's so useless. It serves me no purpose. Um, why do I remember it? You know, because that's just what my brain decided was important, and I was gonna like retain that information. So, um, yeah. So I think brains are pretty great. So yeah, you go ahead and see, you know, try drawing some stuff that excites you, stuff that interests you. Um, and I think that also, of course, is going to amplify your ability to remember.
Mm-hmm.
Is if it is something that you're interested in, you're definitely going to like remember more of it. But even something like a goose, you'd be surprised, you know. Um,
So
yeah.
this process that you're doing right now is this is interesting. So you're doing this with a lasso tool to clean up the outline, right?
No, okay. What I'm doing now, this is me trying to figure out how I want to do this. I'm actually going to select the inverse of this area. I want to protect this area here.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to use a different brush for some like textured kind of effects up here where the flame is. And I just was trying to figure out how to do that. I kept like reselecting it because I was talking, but I wasn't like thinking about the selection I was making. So then I kind of figured it out. But like a brush like the grinder, for example. So, you know, I can come in and do like this kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then I can like go ahead and black it out.
All right.
But this is, you know, just like as a flame sort of thing. And then I can do this.
Put him in a cave.
Yeah. You know, it's just like this is a chance. This is one of those things where you can take advantage of the qualities of the brush to do a lot of the heavy lifting. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
The brush is going to do the work here. I'm just kind of not doing much of anything. I can come up here though to this edge, and I can sort of, whoops, get some shapes in there.
This looks awesome.
Thank you.
We have about 10 minutes left until we have a finished drawing. No,
Perfect.
almost.
Yeah, we should be done. No problem. I don't think that's unrealistic. I'll probably try some other little things here with the fire. We'll see. Yeah, I come around this side and do the same thing, just kind of protect this hand here. I'm always on this quest to create an action or a script that will like make it easy for me to just block out an area. But since I ink with, you know, like with this tool, for example, I have like these open areas.
Yeah.
That could be kind of problematic, but I'll show you what I've got so far. Maybe people will be interested in this.
Yeah, it's interesting because if you would have, you know, used the Hergé style of work, then of course lasso tool, magic wand select, done.
Probably would have worked pretty well, yeah.
But I agree. I like it quite a lot with open, because at the end of the day, it's the eye that is completing the line with the gap. You know, visually it feels closed, although it's not closed.
Correct. Yeah, and I think that's a great thing again also about drawing, is that you can leave stuff out and then let the viewer fill it in. And that's one of the joys of being a person looking at art, is that you get to do stuff like that. In fact, one of my favorite comics artists, and just artists, the people who draw, let me just put it that way, because his drawings are superb, is a man named Chris Samnee.
Okay.
Samnee. He has an interesting last name. And he sort of came on the scene because he was known for leaving stuff out. That was his thing, like using negative space to his advantage, and to great advantage, to do some beautiful drawings. So I really recommend people check out his work. Everything he does right now on Twitter is, he does this thing for Inktober called Battober, where he just does a bunch of Batman illustrations, and they're so cool. And you'll see him sometimes still using that cool technique that he was known for early on in his career, this whole thing of just leaving stuff out.
Can you just say his name again? Because I'm going to write it in the chat so people can Google it.
It's Chris.
Yeah.
And then CHRIS. CHRIS.
Oh, Chris. Yeah.
Because there are different kinds of Chris spellings. And then his last name is Samnee. It's SAMNEE. Chris Samnee. Very cool stuff. I mean, just great. One of my favorites for sure. Just, he's a beast of an artist. Truly.
Okay. So, a quick Google search already shows his, like, the first images I see is like, okay, wow.
Yeah.
Very bold.
Yes. Just a big, bold shapes. Really understands how to wield a pen and a brush. And you know, if you can find early stuff he did with these areas that are just completely missing, and you fill in the gaps, he does it in such a great way. Really fun to look at. He was influenced by a guy named Toth, Alex Toth, but some people call him Alex Toth, and I don't know which is correct, so I could be wrong. I've always said Toth, but you know, what do I know? Yeah, so please check out Chris Samnee. He is a beast. And that'll give you some ideas. That's the thing about art. It's so great to be able, because of Google, you know, for us to look at all this different stuff and get inspired and have ideas for things to try in our own work. And, you know, what a treat.
I like that we're combining, you know, the brush that you used for, you know, with the clear lines, opposed to the brush that is rather organic, that actually looks like a brush.
Oh yeah,
for the background.
Thank you. That goes back to what we were talking about on the outset, which is like, what do you use that works well with, you know, what brushes play nicely together, I think is how I phrased it. And sometimes that contrast between clean and gritty and rough and dirty is exactly what you need. Sometimes that just is enough to sort of elevate the work, you know, make it really work. I think in this case it's working out. It's working. So I'm happy with it. It's doing its thing.
Yep.
And I can even like do this. I'll make a layer just to show this on top, but I can work with white on black, you know, why not?
That's a good idea. We'll blend it a little bit better.
Yeah. So that just kind of gives me a whole other option there. You know, you play, and you get stuff eventually that's going to work for you.
I would probably, you know what I would do? Do you emphasize the light? I would, on his left cheek, I would add a little bit of, like, on his hoodie.
Yeah,
you know, because it's so bright.
So let's
But
try that. Let's try that. You can, and this is the thing too, is, you start to decide, well, how much do I want to be pure black? And am I going to lose the drawing, and you can work with layers then if you want to be cautious. But you can do stuff like this. You can completely, use the light situation as a way to block in
do you
shapes.
do you find to squint your eyes sometimes? Because
Oh, I squint all the time when I'm drawing from observation, but
oh, okay, because that's what I'm constantly doing, like to get a kind of like a bird's eye view and see how it looks like from like a smaller scale, or like
so this kind of thing, this can be dangerous. But if you have undo, you can always undo it. I can even just do that, just bye-bye, get rid of that part of the nose, because then you're really playing up the light. But another thing you can do is this. You can, whoops, hang on a minute. I didn't realize I was drawing on that same layer. Another thing you can do is this. You can, and do we have 2 minutes or so? Am I good?
Yeah, 3 minutes actually.
Okay, look, if you want to start getting into it, you can start getting into some grayscale stuff, right?
Make it a tritone picture.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. So
yeah,
this might be the solution where you're still able to suggest, what happens with that light, but you don't go so dark that you lose some of that nice line work, that you felt good about in the drawing. So
yeah, and layers are key, obviously, because then you can just get rid of it if you don't want to.
You have options. This is, again, the beautiful thing about working digitally is you could totally go through the whole drawing.
Yeah.
And just do stuff like this. And that's a whole other idea. So, do what you want. And that could be nice too.
Becomes very 3D-ish all of a sudden. I mean, not that it wasn't 3D-ish, but now being able to add this 50% gray of shadow.
Oh, sure. It always makes a difference, just a bit more dimension. So, yeah, there you go. I mean,
that looks so nice. I don't have time
to throw this all in, but you can see how that would go. Thank you. Glad you like it. And I hope everyone out there learned something. I think this was enjoyed their time.
No, I think it was a wonderful stream. The chat loves it. Some people had to go already, but everyone was full of love and very appreciative about our stream and what you said and what you showed. I think it was super inspiring. I learned a lot, certainly, which is always great. Not only to be a host, but also to be a student of fellow artists, and never stop learning and be inspired by seeing masters at work. I would love to see this actually go further with the character. There was some chat about making it colored, but since it's Inktober, it should be somewhat black and white. But I can totally see this in a color version as well. But maybe that's for another stream or for another day. For now, I would love to say thank you to everyone that joined in the stream. Thank you so much, Kyle, for being our guest and showing your amazing skills and sharing your knowledge. Hope to see you next time. Hope to see you sometime in person as well. Would be a pleasure.
Yes, I will. I will see you. I will come to Germany and I will see you.
Fantastic. And everyone, keep drawing. Never stop drawing. Never stop learning. And see you soon.
Thanks, everybody.